Hi, all. It was nice spending time with you all earlier this evening. I wanted to take a few moments and follow up on two things that we explored that I hope will be helpful to you. One is to say a little bit more about the landscape of the mind illustration, because it can be drawn upon in ways that can be useful for reasons that have some science basis to it, but you'll know from your own experience for feeling a little less stressed and a little more settled during the day, and to bring about a little bit greater awareness of our experience through the illustration as a technique. And then, if you found the discussion of mindfulness and the taste of the various practices, the relaxation practice with the slower, deeper breaths, and the concentration practice, which brought relaxation and concentration and a little bit of awareness together to offer you a little bit of a longer opportunity to practice, maybe 5 or 6 minutes. So, with regard to the landscape of the mind illustration, you may recall that running through the center was the freeway of flow, where we're purposeful and productive and have clarity and creativity and courage. And we all know those moments. We don't need a mindfulness practice to know those moments. They're fundamental to who we are. But as the car on the little freeway of flow indicates, there's headlights, and there's a focus, and there's a attending to the task at hand, and there's a steadiness that oftentimes is upon us in those very moments. And then there's the whole landscape, where when the mind wanders off, often with an unbidden attention that just shifts around for any of a variety of reasons, which is its own interesting conversation, we can find ourselves lost in the valley of fear, where we're worrying about things that may or may not ever happen. We can find ourselves beginning to ruminate on rumination road, and before we know it, we're swept away by the river of regret, over things that took place that are long over with, and only leave us feeling even more agitated and uncomfortable the way we're relating to it. In the bottom right, there's the dungeon of doubt. We all know the dungeon of doubt and feelings of, am I good enough? And the ways we can hesitate, feel unworthy, and all the other places that that landscape of the mind reminds us that are part of what it is to be a human being. And that's part of what that image is about, to say, this is what it is to be a human being. This is all perfectly normal. And in fact, there's a great deal of insight and good that can come from the ways we learn from our experience. And mindfulness practices are one of the avenues to be a little bit more steadier when we're reflecting on the past, and a little steadier when we're anticipating a future, so that we can, in fact, plan more effectively and learn a little bit more in ways that can be useful to us. And so that illustration is really meant to be something that maybe you keep nearby, you print out, and you're welcome to email me and I'll send you a higher resolution copy. And when you find yourself feeling a little agitated, or your mood begins to shift during the day or whenever, you can look to it and say, where am I? And just the mere inquiry, where am I? And the locating yourself, oh, frustration, oh, weariness, oh, shame, oh, anxiety, the naming of it. And there's a saying, to name is to tame. The naming of it, the identifying of it, is to shift from being somewhat lost in the experience to finding ourselves through the experience. And that shift to a greater awareness of what we're experiencing can make a great difference, and can be an opportunity to be more deliberate and intentional in those moments. Even though we may still feel fear and anxious and doubt, it's a different relationship to it. And that's part of what the mindfulness practices offer us. Viktor Frankl is said, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and within that space is the power to choose our response. And therein lies an opportunity for growth and freedom. And things are happening all day, stimulus after stimulus after stimulus. And an interesting question is, what is our response? And how intentional is that response versus how knee-jerk and automatic pilot is it? And he's suggesting that there's this space between stimulus and response. And part of the mindfulness practices enlarges that space. It's not necessarily a space of time, needing more time, though that can be helpful. It's a psychological space of not being so yanked around by every little thing that goes on that's unpleasant or undesirable or unwanted or unexpected. and to have more facility in those moments. So I offer that image to you in the ways that it might be helpful to you, along the lines of what I just shared, or other ways that you may come up with. And let me also say, I created that image about 12 years ago. I know all of those places. I've been to all of them. And now, 30 years into this practice of mindfulness, I still know all these places. But hopefully, in terms of where I've journeyed through, I notice myself in them a little bit more readily, and I'm able to, at least a little bit more skillfully, orient myself back to uh, the freeway of flow, back to a slightly more steady state. And I think that that's the invitation for all of us to explore for ourselves. And you don't have to wait long to be able to appreciate some of those benefits that flow from, among other things, a steadier attention, from a training of our attention. And that, of course, is something we'll explore in just a few moments when we do a mindfulness practice that brings together relaxation and concentration and awareness. Let me close this piece by sharing something that William James said. In the small group, we had a breakout, and I was very privileged to be a part of that. And thank you for that. And a couple of things were talked about, and this was something I shared, so I want to share it with all of you. William James said, he was a very important psychologist and philosopher at the turn of the last century. He said, the faculty of bringing a wandering attention back again and again and again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. And the practice that we'll do in a moment is a practice of bringing a wandering attention back again and again and again. And back in the 1890s, he said, an education that could teach that would be an education par excellence. And here we have a methodology for doing just that. And so with that, let us now, if you're interested, do a 5 or a 6 minute mindfulness practice by bringing ourselves into a posture that's upright and stable. As we lower or close our eyes, whichever you prefer, resting attention on the sensations of the body sitting as we breathe. And taking 3 slower, deeper breaths. As we breathe in, a little slower, a little deeper than you may ordinarily. Breathing out, a steady, even, tempered out breath. Breathing in, slow, deep, full, but comfortable. Breathing out. And it can be helpful sometimes to breathe out as if blowing through a straw to help that tempered, even out breath. Breathing in and breathing out. And this may remind you of the practice we did at the very beginning, the slower, deeper in-breath and out-breath, which can be helpful for achieving a slightly more relaxed state of mind and body. And now allowing the breath to resume its natural pacing and rhythm, whatever that may be in this moment. It doesn't matter if the breathing is shallow or choppy or silky or smooth. It is what it is. And to be aware and to cultivate awareness is to stay present for what is arising, not being so quick to fix or change it, to first size it up for what it is. And so we attend to the sensations of the breath as it naturally flows through the body. You may notice the sensations as the air enters and leaves the nostrils or the mouth, or maybe the movement of the chest or the belly, expanding and softening, riding along the wave of the breath. And you're attending, you're shining the flashlight of your attention, the headlights of the car, right, on the sensations of the breath. When are those sensations arising? Right here, right now. The mind can move in 1,000 directions, past and future, and yet there is only this moment. And this breath and the sensations of this breath, the one right now, they're arising in this moment. And so it's an alignment of mind and body through this practice as we train our attention. Of course, your mind has wandered, will wander. That's fine. It really is fine. That's not a platitude. That's not a generous thing to say. When from time to time you notice that your mind has wandered, most of the time you won't realize your mind has wandered. Even now you might be thinking about what I just said, and that was your mind wandering. But there will be times when you do realize that your mind has wandered. And in that moment of realization, you've woken up. You've remembered that you've forgotten the breath. You've remembered your intention was otherwise. And in that magical moment of awareness, you have an opportunity, you have a choice. And the intention, the instruction for this practice is to bring your attention, escort your attention gently, non-judgmentally, kindly back to the breath, which patiently awaits your return. For we are practicing exercising our attention by concentrating on an object like the breath. And if the breath isn't comfortable for you for whatever reason, you could rest your attention on the sensations of the hands, resting one in the other or on your lap. You could direct your attention to some sound nearby that's steady, like the hum of the air conditioner. And when your mind wanders, bring it back to that object. Attention likes to have an object. Much of the time during the day, it doesn't. It's just moving. It doesn't have a deliberate object. It just is moving from one thing to the next and taking us with it. So for the next few moments, as we close this practice, rest your attention on the sensations of the breath flowing through the body or wherever you may choose to. Allowing the moment to be as it is, allowing yourself to be just as you are. A busy mind is a busy mind. It's good to know the mind is busy. Feeling antsy is feeling antsy. It's good to know that there's antsiness. And then there's this breath. And when we return our attention to the breath, it's like coming home. It's a refuge. It's always here. And while that can feel relaxing and calming, and there's great value in that, it also has a training and a steadying of attention quality, and that's very important. And all of that research that we looked at is very much in response to the benefits of a steadier attention and the capacity to be more aware of our experience as it is. And when you're ready in the next moment or two, with an awareness of doing so, lifting the gaze, opening the eyes. And I hope you found that little bit longer taste of this exploration of the cultivation of greater mindful awareness through a mindfulness practice such as this to be helpful. You may remember when we were together, I said that there's that acronym STOP, to stop, take a breath, aware of the breath, to observe your experience, and then to proceed, to continue on with whatever may be calling for you. And that's what we just did. You can do it in all of a few breaths at a stop sign for a very short practice. And you could do it for 5 or 6 minutes as we did. And you could do it for 10 or 20 or 30 minutes. It's nice to have guided practices, but it's also a practice which we can engage in with great self-sufficiency. And be kind to yourself. If you think you want to do it for 10 minutes, do it for 5. If you think you can do it for 5 minutes, do it for 2.5. And work your way up, just as if you were going to the gym and you were exercising with equipment and lifting weights. You would build up, and in time you'll find that we are training our attention, and that is what the research finds. And we do have a steadier attention, even if a little bit, and we are more aware of our mind's wandering nature, with the ability to redirect our attention as we choose. Finally, in our small group breakout, the question was asked about resources. And so there's a wonderful book by a very important mindfulness teacher named Sharon Salzberg. It's a very accessible, readable book with some practices in it called Real Happiness. And so I suggest that book as one for summer reading, or something to pick up and read a little bit each night that you'll find useful. And another is a book by Dan Harris, who's an ABC News correspondent, that's called 10% Happier. And its subtitle is something like How I Tamed the Voice in My Head and Reduced Stress Without Losing My Edge. And he journeys through a challenging time he had and how he looked for this and this and this and this, and came upon mindfulness. And it's a very funny read, and it's a very insightful read. And I think you might find that of interest, especially with summer here. Also, many people read that book and said, oh, I get this mindfulness. I see why it's interesting and possibly very important and could be useful to me, but so I don't know how to do it. And so he wrote another book called Meditation for the Fidgety Skeptic, which is more of a nuts and bolts. So there's many books out there, many books out there. And if you're interested in something maybe more specific for an interest that you have in particular, feel free to reach out to me and let me know, and I'll be happy to suggest a reading that might be more, or a resource that might be a little bit more responsive to your interest. Alrighty, I guess I should say that he also has an app called 10% Happier. I feel like I'm plugging Dan Harris's stuff. There's no reason in particular other than I think it's quite skillfully delivered, where he interviews a lot of people, and I'm sure you would find some of them to be people that you find really interesting. And many of them actually have a meditation or a mindfulness practice. And he asks them about it at the beginning. And then that sets up a conversation that moves into lots of interesting terrains about performance and well-being, et cetera. So I think you would also find his app, his podcast, 10% Happier, to be of interest. All right. Again, thank you all for inviting me to spend time with you this evening. I hope our paths will cross in years to come. It was nice, Stan, to reconnect with you after 20 years. And I wish you all well in life and in law.